Hello, Professor Devin and anyone else who has decided to watch. My name is Sarah Shepard, and this is my final art history project. The main topic I have chosen to analyze for this project is going to be about feminism in the neoclassical era, focusing on two different pieces by the artist Jacques Louis David. So to start off, I'm going to give a background on the artist himself. To the left, you will see a self-portrait he did of himself in the year 1794. He was a French painter who embodied the neoclassical style, and he was actually known to be the most celebrated French artist of his day. I would say he was a very big part of the art world in the late 18th, early 19th century, especially because he embodied the style so well. He was also a principal exponent of the neoclassical reaction against the Rococo style, and his career actually began at the age of 18, where he was actually able to attend an art school, and from then on, he just kept on growing. Another thing I found very interesting about David was that his work was a large variety, and you could see a lot of different things he brought into different types of his work. Some of them include rigorous contours, sculpted forms, history paintings, and more. Another interesting thing I liked about him was that if you look deeper into a lot of his paintings, he actually stood for a lot of his morals, and you can see that if you look deeper into each painting. And now we are finally going to start analyzing the two pieces that I've chosen for this project. On the left side, you will see a painting called Cupid and Psyche, and it was done in the year 1871, and that painting is oil on canvas. On the right side, we have the Intervention of the Sabine Women, and that one was done in 1799, and it is also oil on canvas. So now we're going to analyze the first photo, Cupid, and I actually found out that it was Psyche, not Psyche. I believe I said before. I apologize. But I actually find the background context of this painting more interesting than when I first glanced at it. When I began researching it, it became more interesting the more I found out about it. So the people depicted in this photo are Cupid on the left and Psyche on the right. She's a Greek goddess, and her name actually means butterfly, which is why you actually see that insect above her head. If you could zoom in, that is a butterfly right there. And then also on the bed frame right below them in the center of it, you see another butterfly as well. It was also said that the insect they chose, obviously being the butterfly, was actually a very common breed of butterfly. They wanted it to be seen as a real thing to represent the painting as also being a real thing that happens, a common thing almost, instead of using a very rare form of butterflies. Jacques Louis David actually used this story of Cupid and Psyche to explore the conflict between idealized love and physical reality. He wanted to show the contrast between the two. Personally, when I look at this image and try to compare the difference between the male and the female, the one thing that obviously comes to mind first is how his body parts are covered while hers are fully exposed. When I was reading actually about what this painting was about, that was one of the keynotes, was how David portrayed Cupid in a sense as a younger adolescent teen instead of the figure he was normally seen as. One of the articles I even read was saying how he actually purposefully made his face a certain smirk, kind of joking around with the idea. Now, to me, it's kind of hard to see that as not degrading women, but again, during this era, feminism wasn't a big trend. Obviously, compared to today's society, we have grown in so many ways, which I'm so thankful for, but it's crazy to look at the little details that weren't a big deal back then and how now that obviously would be a really big difference. Which again, to me, is why studying this topic was so interesting, because the littlest details tell such a big story. Okay, next we're going to analyze the Intervention of the Sabine Women, which is our next art piece. David actually made this as almost a sequel to another popular art piece that was called Rape of the Sabine Women by an artist named Poussins. Also, side note, sorry, I just want to apologize if I'm pronouncing any of these names incorrectly. But continuing, going back to the original art piece that David got the inspiration from, it's actually, I believe, called The Abduction of the Sabine Women, but some also called it The Rape of Sabine Women. Here is what that original painting was, not the one that was done by Jacques Louis David, but this was the one he got the inspiration for that made this image. And the story behind the image I previously showed you versus the sequel that David rebranded was basically a story talking about the abduction and how these maidens were invited to parties and taken from their families, forced into marriages with certain men, and actually kidnapped. And rape here was actually used in the sense of abduction or bride stealing. And there wasn't really a big difference between raping one and kidnapping one, which sounds crazy to me and very absurd. But during this time period, that's what it was called and the idea of it, although there was apparently no sexual assault that took place. But the reason why David's painting represents so much more than the original one was how he actually chose to empower the women. I was very impressed when looking at the little differences between the original one and this, I keep saying rebranded, but it was just inspired from the first one. You could just tell already that each woman in this painting is fighting against the men, making them look very strong, and is actually the first time I've seen almost equal nudity from men along with women. There are obviously some parts exposed from both, but for the first time, the largest image that I see of a man in this painting, he is almost completely nude, whereas the woman is almost completely dressed, the main center focus of the painting. And specifically during this era, I feel like it wasn't common for artists to stand up against other artists to make a statement, such as David did with this painting, which I really enjoyed, and it does show his morals, which was a big part of all of the art he did. And this painting specifically, I really enjoyed and think he did a good job at that. And that is going to conclude my final project for this class. Here I've listed all of the sources that I used for extra information. And actually the third link is a really interesting article talking about all of feminism that has kept on going throughout art history, and I found it really interesting. I didn't use a lot of information from there, but I do think that it's an interesting article if anyone wants to check it out. And thank you guys so much for a fun semester. Bye.